Starting us off at number 10 is The Exorcist. I would be doing an injustice if I didn't start with one of the scariest movies of all time. And why was it the scariest movie of all time? Because it was one of the scariest books of all time. Written by William Peter Blatty and published in 1971, the book takes place in Washington, D.C. and follows demonically possessed 12-year-old Reagan McNeil, who is also the daughter of a very famous actress. The duo are in Georgetown whilst the mother is filming when Reagan becomes sick. Weird things start happening around the house, which her mother tries to find rational explanations for, and Reagan's condition intensifies and deteriorates. Nothing helps her until the mother gives in and turns to a priest for help. A pair of priests spend the whole book trying to exorcise the demon, and it was actually based off of a real case of possession William heard about in the 50s. I don't want to go into more detail and include spoilers because if you haven't read it, you definitely should. I feel like scary books scare you in a way that movies just can't. When I used to read them at home alone, I physically could not continue reading because I was scared. I was scared of reading. Like, that is a real fear, people. Coming in at number 9 is Blindness. Written by Jose Saramago and published in 1995, the book follows an unnamed city or country that's been afflicted with an unexplainable epidemic of blindness. And since most people there go blind, a social and economic breakdown soon follows. The plot involves a group of unnamed characters, and the book is written in really long sentences, and there are no speech marks around the dialogue, so you're also like, wait, who's speaking right now? The first half of the book takes place in a dirty, overcrowded asylum where the group and countless other blind people have been quarantined. And the whole thing descends into anarchy basically. People are worried about the availability of food, necessities, no medicines are allowed inside, so even a small infection could end up deadly. Gangs start forming, they start raping women in exchange for giving them food. It just gets really, really bad. The only person in the land that doesn't get infected was the doctor's wife, and we follow how she has to try and help the group survive. At number 8 we have The Haunting of Hill House. It's not a horror if a haunted house isn't on this list, am I right? Written by Shirley Jackson and published in 1959, the book has been dubbed one of the best literary ghost stories in the 20th century. It went on to become 2 films, a play, and the basis of a Netflix series, so it's safe to say even in the 21st century we are getting a lot of inspiration from it. Shirley even drew the floor plans of the house and its outside before beginning the novel. The plot takes place in a mansion called Hill House and follows 4 main characters. An investigator of the supernatural, Eleanor, a shy girl, and a disabled mother, Theodora, and the mansion's heir, Luke. They all come to the house because of having experienced something paranormal or wanting to investigate the paranormal. The house itself has been the site of many deaths and suicides, and as their stay progresses, creepy things start happening, as they always do. The house itself seems sentient and angry, but the best part of the book is the narrator. We trust Eleanor from the start because she seems quite reliable and sweet, but as the book progresses she becomes more and more unreliable, she starts descending into madness, and then it gets confusing on whether the things happening in the house are really happening, or she's just seeing things or hallucinating them. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Filling our number 7 slot is The Silence of the Lambs. I don't know how I could have made this list and not included Hannibal Lecter. Written by Thomas Harris and published in 1988, the book is actually a sequel about the forensic psychiatrist and cannibalistic serial killer Dr. Hannibal Lecter. First of all, has anyone seen the show Hannibal? I watched the first season. I could literally only watch 1 episode a day, not even binge it, because it was just too taxing watching such screwed up things happen for so long. Like, I used to have to mentally prepare before watching it. But anyway, at this point Hannibal is already in jail, so the plot follows an FBI trainee called Clarice who is given the task of drawing up psychological profiles of serial killers, starting with Hannibal. Well, that's what she's told, but her real mission that she doesn't know about is to try and get Hannibal's help identifying a new serial killer on the loose dubbed Buffalo Bill. The plot follows her periodically visiting Hannibal and probing him about the killer. He gives her cryptic clues in exchange for knowing about her disturbing childhood as an orphan. This book won 2 awards for best novel, and it's a literary gem. I haven't met anyone who hasn't heard of The Silence of the Lambs. Like, they wouldn't even know what it is, but they would have heard of it for sure. Now at number 6 is Carrion Comfort. Written by Dan Simmons and published in 1989, it won the Locust Poll Award for Best Horror Novel, the Bram Stoker Award, and the August Derleth Award for Best Novel. Stephen King even calls it one of the greatest horror novels of the 20th century, so based on that, I reckon it's a pretty good book. The book focuses on a fraction of humanity who has intense psychic powers called the Ability. These people can control someone from a distance, and I mean control them, like physically ability to, as in they could make someone commit murder if they really wanted to. Killing someone indirectly gives the ability users energy and youth, so they're almost like pseudo-vampires. The book sets up the fact the abilities have been used throughout time, whether that's fake charisma of a world leader, everyday murders, or the Holocaust. Although it's split into many timelines, it mostly follows a group of immoral people in the 80s, some of which want to take over the world. Investigators pursue a series of murders and realize these people really need to be stopped. It's honestly brutal. They get together in one scene and talk about all the people they killed, including John Lennon, and then later on two of them end up fighting but use normal humans around them as soldiers to fight each other. It's screwed up, but isn't every book on this list? Coming in at number 5 is A Head Full of Ghosts, written by Paul G. Tremblay and published in 2015. The book follows an American family that's troubled. The dad is unemployed, they barely have any money, and then things get even worse due to the mental illness of their 14-year-old daughter, Marjorie. The book is told from the perspective of Marjorie's 8-year-old sister, Mary, and it starts when Marjorie starts telling Mary macabre stories instead of innocent Dr. Seuss ones. Welcome to the real world, Mary. Anyway, the dad, who is a born-again Catholic, decides Marjorie doesn't have a mental illness, she's demonically possessed, two very different things, and so he gets the help of his priest to try and exorcise her. And let's just say Marjorie is not really telling the truth. I'll leave it at that. At number 4 is Let the Right One In. Written by John Lindqvist and published in English in 2008, the book is essentially a vampire story, but it's not like Twilight, before you guys just skip number 4. And for the record, I just like to say I read all the Twilight books and the books were actually really good. Please do not base the series on Kristen Stewart's acting, thank you. But anyway, the plot follows a 12-year-old boy called Oscar, a vampire child called Eli, and its caretaker Hakan. The story takes place in Stockholm in the 80s and focuses on a plethora of disturbing things like pedophilia, self-mutilation, murder, bullying, genital mutilation, etc. Oscar becomes friends with Eli when it moves in next door, and he finds out Eli was turned into a vampire when they were a child and hence forever remains in a young body and mind. Hakan, Eli's caretaker, was a former teacher who got caught with child pornography, and as you can imagine, he's very much in love with Eli and goes out and kills people and gets blood for them in order to sustain them in exchange for money. Even though Hakan would do it for free if Eli would let them be physically intimate, but we all know that's not gonna happen. The story goes on when Hakan gets caught on his last blood procuring mission, and things just get worse and worse from there. Death, murder, acid throwing, blood drinking, the book has it all, and it was adapted into 2 feature films. Filling our number 3 slot is The House of Leaves, and this one is hard because half the people who've read it say it's a horror story and the other half say it's a love story, and I mean there is horror in love and vice versa, so can it be both? But anyway, written by Mark Danielewski and published in 2000, the book itself is incredibly confusing. It has footnotes, and those footnotes have their own footnotes. Some pages just have a few words or a line of text. Some pages you have to rotate the book so you can actually read it. Some pages words are arranged in a way that mirror the story, but basically the format of the book is meant to make you feel claustrophobic. The plot has many narratives, but mostly follows a tattoo parlor employee called Johnny. Johnny's looking for a new apartment when his friend recommends a place in his building from a man who just died. When moving in, he finds an academic manuscript written by that man about a film called The Navidson Record. Except Johnny can't find any evidence of the film ever existing. The main plot focuses on the Navidson family story. The family come home from a trip one day and find that their house is expanded internally, but externally it looks exactly the same. There are more rooms, hallways upon hallways, and all of them are featureless and unlit, and there always just seems to be a low growl sound in the house. Characters start exploring the house and venture into the endless passageways, which ultimately leads to murder, insanity, and death. Now, the second plot takes place in the footnotes, and it's about what's happening in Johnny's life, and it gets more and more unclear whether his obsession with the manuscript and consequent paranoia and delusions are because of madness, drug use, or the manuscript itself. The third and final mini-plot are letters woven in from Johnny's mother, who's in a psychiatric hospital. Honestly, with this book, you really end up doubting your own perception of the story and what's fact and what isn't, and honestly, what more can you want from a book? Especially a horror book. Now number 2 is It. Written by Stephen King, which I'm sure you all already knew, and published in 1986, It is iconic. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the book since the movies are all out as well, and regardless of whether you've seen them or not, I feel like everyone knows what it's about. The story follows a group of kids that call themselves the Losers Club. The kids realize they all encountered the same shape-shifting entity which took the form of their biggest fears. They named the thing It because they had no idea what it was. It wasn't human, it was genderless, it was it. They figure out it is behind all the child murders happening in the town, and they try to stop the evil clown. There's even a bit where Pennywise itself is narrating and telling the reader where it came from. The book is split into two timelines taking place 30 years apart, so we see the club as kids in the first one, and then we see them return to Derry in the second one because there's been another slew of child murders. I can't even count the amount of times people have recommended it to me and told me it genuinely scared the living hell out of them, and I still refuse to read it. I'm just not gonna do it. That's not me. And finally, at number 1 is Rosemary's Baby. Written by Era 11 and published in 1967, the book sold over 4 million copies, and that made it the best-selling horror novel of the 60s. The plot follows Rosemary Woodhouse and her struggling actor husband Guy, who recently move into an old Gothic apartment building. Despite being warned about the building's strange history involving murder and witchcraft, they move in anyway. And the couple are quickly welcomed by neighbors Minnie and Roman, who Rosemary gets a weird vibe from. Due to some freak accident blinding his theatrical rival, Guy gets a great role and agrees to try for their first kid. Hurrah! But not. But that night, Rosemary has a sexual dream involving an inhuman creature, and the next day she has claw scratches all over her boobs, on her crotch, basically everywhere. And then somehow she becomes pregnant, but then falls severely ill, losing more and more weight and craving raw meat. Everything goes tits up, and I can 100% say Guy is not the father.
Starting off at number 10, we have The Stand by Stephen King. This book is probably one of those books you should put off reading until after the pandemic is over, whenever that is. We all know Stephen King is quite literally the king of horror, but this novel will hit home way too hard and fill you with ideas of what could have been. The Stand is about an apocalyptic world that fell to a deadly flu-like virus intended to be used as a biological weapon. Already this sounds a bit familiar, but it gets worse. In this book, King introduces one of his most famous villains, Randall Hall. Once the outbreak takes hold, people start having visions of a benevolent woman and a terrifying dark man who is, of course, plotting to destroy the world. I'll stop now before I add any spoilers. Bear in mind, this book is a commitment. There are two versions, the 400-page one Stephen's publisher forced him to publish, or the 1200-page unabridged version. Either way, get comfy and leave the light on, because once you start, you won't be able to put this book down. Also, they made a TV show about it, so check that out too. But after you read the book.
In our number 9 spot today, we have The Collector. The Collector is a book that was written in 1963 by John Fowles and is a pretty wild thriller. This book is written from two separate perspectives and is about an absolute psycho who kidnaps a young woman who is an art student. He keeps her locked up in the cellar of his farmhouse, and part of the novel is from the point of view of the captor, and the other half is told from the perspective of the woman he has kidnapped. The beginning of the novel is from his point of view, and it details his obsession with the woman and why he has formed this horrible plan. The part from her point of view is detailed through diary entries that she's made rather than regular narration. The whole book is an absolute roller coaster and is extremely interesting. Of course, both characters have quite a few developments over the course of the story, and sometimes things can get extremely dark, but the ending is one that none of us really ever saw coming.
Coming in at number 8, we have The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. Dude, I'm not claustrophobic, and obviously there are tons of Edgar Allan Poe short stories, books we could have used, but damn. We couldn't make this list without featuring him at least once, and this story felt right. Warning, some spoilers ahead, but also, this was written in like 1846, you've had time. The Cask of Amontillado is a story of revenge. Montresor was deeply insulted by his rival, Fortunato, and uses his fondness for sherry to exact his revenge. But the way he does it, and the way the story builds around it is so skillful. It's so horrible you want to look away, but you can't. Montresor planned everything to a T, even making Fortunato bait himself into his own trap. Fortunato ends up watching Montresor build a wall of thick stone, trapping him inside a deep cellar forever. I think that's what gets me about this story, is that he's watching his own demise and he can't do anything about it. It terrifies me. Oh man, so maybe I am claustrophobic. Maybe. So anyway, check that one out.
In our number 7 spot today, we have Tender is the Flesh. Tender is the Flesh is a dystopian novel that was originally written in Spanish by Agustina Bazterrica. This novel is based in a world where a terrible virus has wiped out all animals except for humans. Instead of living a vegan lifestyle, humans have adapted in a way where cannibalism is now legal. This novel describes the process of breeding and slaughtering humans just for the means of consumption. Humans who are bred for food have their vocal cords removed in order to make them easier to control, and because of the fact that meat meant for human consumption should certainly not be able to speak. The main character of this story is a man named Marcos, and he is a human meat supplier who is a little unsure about these new societal rules, but we also delve into his personal life and the things he has gone through previous to this point. Marcos is divorced, and everything changes when he is given one of the female humans who is meant to help with the production of the human meat. This story is absolutely insane, and while the entire premise is quite dark, the twist this book has is truly unbelievable.
So coming in at number 6, we have 1984 by George Orwell. I mean, duh, we're putting this book on here, of course. It's terrifying. This is the most terrifying love story you will ever read, and you should. This book perfectly illustrates the bone-chilling possibilities that could happen if a government decided to take totalitarianism as far as it could go. It's been banned in the past for its social, sexual, political content, which is hilariously ironic because the whole book is about what happens if censorship goes too far. From the horrors of erasing human beings through unpersoning, persecuting people for thought crimes, the creation of newspeak for abolishing love, all the way to the most gruesome kinds of torture, like, think Game of Thrones. There are images I cannot erase from my mind. I remember knowing that Orwell wrote this as a commentary on Stalinism, but I didn't expect the love story. The two main characters endeavor to commit a small rebellion, which is to simply fall in love, because that's the only thing that they can do to fight this massive establishment. The way Orwell finds ways of igniting the humanity in his readers in order to highlight the terror of the circumstances they're in, it's haunting. The scary element of this book isn't a killer clown or a monster with 18 eyes. Instead, it's absolute power. This book outlines the terror of power in a world that's gone too far, and you won't be the same after you read it.
In our number 5 spot today, we have A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing. A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing is a stream of consciousness novel that was written by Emer McBride. This novel tells the story of a girl growing up in a traditional Irish family and all the struggles that she faces. At a first glance, this might not seem like a horrible thing that should be feared, but this novel goes deep. The writing style is absolutely fantastic and really highlights exactly what this character is going through. We never get a chance to know the name of the girl, but we get to know so much about her long-winded Catholic mother who is cruel, her disabled brother, and her very creepy uncle. Without giving much away, this really does set the scene for what's to come. This book can be hard to read because of the content, but it can also be hard to read because of the writing style. But as you go through, you understand why it is written this way, and it is genius. This book is intense, and while it took Emer 9 years too long to publish it, that really is a testament to how perfect it is.
Coming in at number 4, we have The Invasion of the Body Snatchers by Jack Finney. I can't. This book, I don't want to sleep for weeks. For weeks. Imagine an alien invasion happens and you can't even see it. Before you know it, everyone you know and love is acting strangely. Soon bodies start piling up, all while more and more people become something you can't explain. Written in 1955, Invasion of the Body Snatchers by Jack Finney is so terrifying, it has sparked 4 movies and paranoid horror literature. The story recounts the horrific experience of a silent invasion where alien beings disguised as plants steal the bodies of living humans while they sleep. The most terrifying part for me was the struggle for the characters to try and stay awake, because if they didn't, the creatures would be right behind them in like what seemed like seconds. Even thinking about it right now makes my heart race. Have you ever tried not falling asleep in math class or an exam? Yeah, imagine that, but your life depends on it. terrifying. This is the kind of horror book that will make you want to drink like 28 Red Bulls so you never sleep again.
In our number 3 spot today, we have Exquisite Corpse. Exquisite Corpse is a horror novel that was written by Poppy Z. Bright and was published in 1996. The publication for this book was quite a process for Poppy. In 1991, she had a deal with a publishing company to write 3 books. Exquisite Corpse was the final of the 3, and this company refused to publish it due to its violent content. After sending it to multiple other publishing companies, the overwhelming consensus was that the writing was fantastic, but the content was being described as too nihilistic, too extreme, and a bloodbath without justification. Of course, however, the novel did eventually end up being published, and a lot of people now understand the reviews the publishing companies were giving it. While a fantastically written book, this story follows Andrew Compton, who is a convicted serial killer and cannibal who ends up getting a second chance at living life beyond the cell. This story is very raw and absolutely horrifying. The parts of the story I haven't told you are certainly not for the faint of heart.
Coming in at number 2, we have The Troop by Nick Cutter. This next one is Lucy McPhee, Queen of Dark approved. She loves a good scary book, does our Lucy. The Troop is basically Lord of the Flies meets Alien, kind of. I asked her why she thought this book was so scary, and she said, it's scary because the kids have to become adults real damn fast, and no one is there to help them. Also touches on how differently people react in unprecedented circumstances. Some lose their grip on reality. I love that word unprecedented. I've heard it way too many times this year. Essentially, Dr. Tim Riggs takes a group of boys out on a camping trip in Canada when out of nowhere, the troop has to battle a vicious infestation of contagious intestinal worms who starve their hosts. Some go mad and lose their grip on reality. I'll stop there so I don't, spoil everything, but considering this one is Queen of Dark approved, you know why it's on this list.
In our number 1 spot today, we have The Wasp Factory. The Wasp Factory is a novel that was published in 1984 and was written by Ian Banks. This is the first novel that was published from this writer, as the novels he had previously written had not been accepted, and this one was his attempt at writing a more mainstream novel. Well, it worked since it got published, but this novel is anything but mainstream. It follows a psychopathic teenager who is living on a secluded Scottish island. The teenager describes his childhood and the things that went on with some very gruesome details. We read not only about his past, but also the past of his family and how twisted it really is, which also gives us insight into just how wild this guy's mind really is. There are some pretty horrific depictions of violence in this book, which is what led to its mixed reviews. It certainly is a critically acclaimed novel, but it has also been called a work of unparalleled depravity, and that certainly speaks volumes about what exactly goes on.
Coming in at number 10, we have Real Life Death Note. Death Note is a Japanese manga series written by Toshimi Oba. I'm really sorry if I pronounced that wrong. This story is about a high school student who comes across a mysterious notebook, the Death Note. He soon finds out that he can use the notebook to kill people by simply writing their names down. This series was adapted into an American movie and it is now on Netflix. Anyway, a lot of teenagers in real life have been inspired by the manga series and the film, and they've started their own Death Note books. There have been countless incidents. For example, in Pingtung County in Taiwan, they saw a string of Death Note inspired issues. In 2015, a middle school student in Pennsylvania was suspended for making his own Death Notebook and writing the names of 15 students in it. Some people say that the story of Death Note stems back to some truth too, with legends circulating that in ancient Chinese civilizations, the Yellow Emperor had a notebook of death. I actually have to thank one of our subscribers for bringing this next book to my attention. I was reading the comments on the top 10 cursed books part 1, and one of our subscribers highlighted this to me, so thank you Kim Jana for the recommendation. Coming into number 9, we have the Book of the Son of Genus. This is a 13th century grimoire containing Arabic magic spells and provides guidance for the afterlife. The book is all about demons and jinns and evil beings, and despite being a highly influential text in the Arabic and Muslim worlds, it has long been banned in a lot of Islamic cultures for its subject matter. The book allows the reader to communicate with spirits, but that doesn't always mean good spirits. Coming into number 8, we have the Cursed Babylonian Tablets. Babylon was said to be an ancient city in what is present-day day Iraq and Syria. The Babylonian era ran from 1895 BCE to around 7 BCE, so hundreds of years. Back in those days, books weren't really a thing. Instead, people read from inscriptions on tablets, so rocks or stone. These tablets were often known to carry a curse. A Babylonian king placed a curse on a set of clay tablets back in the 7th century BCE, having the text inscribed with, "Whosoever shall carry off this tablet, or shall inscribe his name on it side by side with mine own, may Asher and Belet overthrow him in wrath and anger, and may they destroy his name and the prosperity in the land." Bit dramatic. It turns out that actually these tablet curses were very common. Because reading material was hard to find, ancient people often tried safeguarding their property by claiming it was cursed. Basically, it was a ye olde way of making sure little twerps didn't steal your things. Coming into number 7, we have the Babadook book. There was a time when the book from the 2014 Australian horror movie The Babadook was fiction. The book in the movie is cursed and or haunted, as it is constantly delivered to Amelia and Oscar's home. In the movie, the book depicts the horrifying events that are about to befall the family in a creepy pop-up style. Now, movie lovers have gone one step further and demanded that the illustrator turn the fictional book into a reality. That's right, you can now buy the haunted book for yourself in real life. Following a successful crowdfunding campaign, Insight Editions was chosen to create a limited run of 6,000 books. I think it's a really cool idea, but I'm not sure if I'd want that in my home. If it's in a word or it's in a look, you can't get rid of the Babadook. Duck, so get that book out my house, thanks. Coming in at number 6, we have A Portrait of Marriage by Curiosity Incorporated. I was trying to do some research into lesser known haunted books because I guess only the bigger stuff makes headlines, and I thought, you know what, there must be like, you know, your average bog standard ghost that is chosen to haunt your average bog standard book, and it turns out I was right. I found a video by small and up and coming YouTuber Curiosity Incorporated, and he's an antiques trader. He made a video called Saga of the Haunted Book. Who knew books could be so creepy? In this video, he talks about how he bought a bunch of old books off a dealer, and as she left, she basically just turned around and said to him, "Oh, by the way, one of these is haunted." I'm not sure how I would deal with that. Like, tell me it's haunted before I buy it. The book is called Portrait of a Marriage by Vita Sackville West and Harold Nicholson. It seems that the spirit had an attraction to the book. Now, the antiques dealer said, "I certainly wouldn't want to be the guy who got stuck haunting this book." So far though, he hasn't mentioned any further weird goings on. Forget about one spooky book, all of the books in this library are plagued by a pesky spirit. Coming into number 5, we have the Leeds Library Ghost. Leeds, Yorkshire, England, one of my favourite places. Yorkshire is steeped in ancient history, so you'll regularly hear ghost stories coming from this area of the United Kingdom. The Leeds Library dates back to 1768, so it's older than the USA. The ghost haunting the premises is said to be the first ever librarian of the building, Vincent Sternberg. In 1844, the new librarian, James McAllister, came face to face with the ghost of Sternberg as he worked late at night. Now, the ghost is said to linger most frequently around the old books, and in 2012, researcher Jeremy Dyson spent 12 hours in the library documenting the hauntings. He uploaded a really interesting and revealing video to YouTube that actually captures some of the ghostly goings on in the building. Another investigator, Sean Reynolds, captured a ladder moving alongside a bookshelf at the library. Coming in at number 4, we have the Necronomicon pop-up nightmare book featuring Cthulhu. Anyone who loves the Evil Dead franchise will know about the fictional Book of the Dead. This Book of the Dead has actually long since been mentioned in literature, possibly first in the 1924 H.P. Lovecraft's The Hound. Either way, Proposition Press have taken it upon themselves to turn the Necronomicon into a truly terrifying pop-up book. The book has 5 pop-up scenes, including pull tabs, and they depict moments from the 5 original Evil Dead stories: the Dunwich Horror, the Shadow Out of Time, the Call of the Cthulhu, At the Mountain of Madness, and the Color Out of Space. Now, they may not actually be cursed like the source material, but I have to say the images will haunt my nightmares forever. Muggles beware at number 3, this grimoire will get you. In 2013, 2 handwritten spiral-bound spellbooks or grimoires were sold for $13,865 in Toronto via abebooks.com. A grimoire is a witch's spellbook and is generally believed that actually the book has to be burned after the death of the witch or else the book becomes cursed. Now these grimoires appear to have been written in the 1960s by a high priestess of Wicca called Adestra Irene. She was said to be an American witch with English and Swedish ancestry. Now it's not known what's happened to her, whether she's alive or dead, but the opening pages of both of the texts contained a warning that reads, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." So basically, no muggles allowed. Next up, this depressing book led to a spate of suicides. At number 2, we have The Sorrows of Young Werther. The Sorrows of Young Werther is a best-selling book written by a 25-year-old Wolfgang von Goethe. The book was published in Germany in 1774 and is a semi-autobiographical tale of a failed romance. It's told via letters from a man named Werther to his friend Wilhelm. When Werther finds out that his love has married another man, he borrows 2 pistols and shoots himself, although he botches it and it takes him a grueling 12 hours to die. The book led to some of the first known examples of copycat suicides. The men would dress in the same clothing as described by Goethe and use a pistol to shoot themselves. Often the book was found at the scene of suicides. Now after the book's publication and the spate of copycat suicides, sociologists began to suspect that suicide may be culturally contagious. Finally, at number 1, this is one of the most interesting things I learned today. So next up, this one author cursed himself and everyone involved in his book's publication, and he's now the target of a serious Iranian murder plot. What am I talking about? Salman Rushdie and the Curse of the Satanic Verses. Salman Rushdie received a very, very, very intense response from the Muslim community for his 4th novel, The Satanic Verses. The book, in fact, garnered such an intense response that a fatwa was ordered. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's basically a death order, and the current monetary value of it is thought to be over $3 million. This was issued by Ayatollah Khomeini, the former supreme leader of Iran. Now Rushdie became the target of the Muslim order, and it's still in place. It wasn't just him either. The Iranian government demanded the death of the author and all of those involved in its publication. While Rushdie wasn't hit, his Japanese translator was stabbed to death in 1991. The Italian translator was also stabbed in July 91, but he survived. The Norwegian publisher, William Nygaard, was shot 3 times in 1993, but survived. And it's thought that the fatwa was behind a deadly fire at a hotel in Turkey in which 35 people died. Salman Rushdie is still alive, but he is still under police protection. Some Muslims out there still want to kill him. It turns out that fatwas can only be retracted by the person that issued them, and Khomeini is dead.